Hi my friend, in this video we're going to be making modern classic house drums inspired by Harry Romero's song Revolution. And we're going to find out if we can do this in under 30 minutes by using the 80-20 rule of house music drum production. What you're listening to right now is the song we'll be working on. And what you're looking at right now is the Ableton project file that we'll be working on. In particular, we're going to focus on this drum group right here. We're going to go in order of the layers that I actually built them out so that you can follow along and recreate your own drums in this exact same way. And make sure you stick around to the end of the video because we'll be doing a full recap of the 80-20 rule so you can apply what you learned in this video to your music. Because all in all, it only took me about 30 minutes or so to recreate these drums that you see and hear right here. And all in all, this track took me about 5 to 6 hours to complete, fully mixed, mastered, and arranged as you can see here, so it's ready to be played in DJ sets or sent out to labels. And if you want to learn how to finish songs faster just like this, I've also made you a free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that I use to completely finish one song just like this every single week. Visit the link that's on screen now or in the description to grab the ultimate song finishing toolkit for free. And if you want to take things to the next level, you can also find a link to this video's project files in the description as well. With that said, let's jump into this. Alright. So let's take a look at the drums for this one. So first, let's just kind of take a listen to the drum track that I've created. And then flip it to the reference. What we made. And the reference. So one of the first things here is what I like to do is make sure that the actual track is in the reference track is in the file, your Ableton project file. And I usually turn off the track here and then I press key and I set up so the S key will flip between what we have going on, what we're building and what we're referencing. So we can flip back and forth just like this. So we can make our decisions against the reference track. Super important. Another thing that I like to do also right off the bat is I have this arrangement track. And so I'll use these empty MIDI clips to kind of figure out what the arrangement of the song is. This will come into play when fleshing out the full track and finishing it. So I usually work vertically, create the loop, and then use this arrangement track to create a full track. But it also helps when you figure out the drums because then you can figure out where in the song the drums are isolated. So at the beginning of the song, we have this. And the outro, we also have this. And so what can be important about this is it can help you find areas where the drums are isolated, and that way we can use that to extract elements from the drums. So in this example, there's kind of this bass in the intro, and maybe it sounds like the kick has some of the low end taken away. So in the outro, we can hear a full fat kick, and we can hear the drums by themselves without any bass, which is really nice for getting some extraction stuff going. So in terms of extraction stuff, this is what I mean by this. So you can see here in the reference track, I've isolated a couple different clips and I've changed the colors just so we can see them a little clearly. So right here we have, I believe, a kick. And so what I did was I found an area where the kick was alone, press Command E on both sides so that it's isolated. And then what you can do is you can right click it, press show in browser. And then if you click this little button here, it'll use Ableton's similar sound feature to find samples in your library that sound similar to that. So if we play this, we have this bunch of different sounds here of varying qualities. And the idea is to use that similar sound feature. So then the first thing I do is I have this kick here. And so a couple things. One thing I like to do is I have this little arc kick rack that I made. So I'll actually drag this sample into the simpler here. And then I'll play with a bit of these macro knobs to kind of isolate the kick even further. And this way I could layer in the kick from the actual reference track in with what I have going on. So you can see here, it's just a 4-on-4 pattern. And I have 2 kicks playing. Then what I did was using that similar sound feature, I found a bunch of different similar kicks and then dropped them into this drum rack here. And that way what I could do is when I'm playing the track, I can skip between them just like that while flicking back and forth between the reference kind of on time with the music. So you can almost imagine your kick being in that song. So you can really try to hear the right kind of sound. Because really the main 3-step process that I go about is first pattern, then sound, and then volumes. So In terms of the pattern, it's just a 4 on the 4 kick pattern. You can see here. And something that I actually do too is I have my this drum group here. It usually comes preloaded with like these patterns. So it's like already the classic open hi-hat pattern, classic hi-hat pattern, classic clap pattern. And that way it's a good starting point to get things going. So you don't have to always punch in like the 1, 2, 3, 4 each time. Just like the template already has it in there. So you can just get started. So then once that's kind of done, main thing after that is setting up the volume. So the main thing, the way I go about that is just flicking back and forth between what we have in the reference, kind of like this. Really listening for the kick. I feel like ours is a little bit louder, but kind of as you're going about it, you're going to make changes against the reference. You're not necessarily going for a carbon copy. And a quick look at any processing here, because there's usually not too much that I add. I've been adding this drum bus a lot lately, so if you listen to the before without the drum bus, and then with it, a pretty big difference. So I've been really into this lately because you can add a little bit of saturation, which kind of fills up the sound, makes it sound a little grittier. But you can also dampen it, so you can remove some of that high end. And then one of the things that I like the most is this boom. So you can add in kind of like that like sub frequency underneath to make the kick sound a lot fuller and better, I would say. So that's kind of the process that I've been doing quite a bit lately. So again, like without it, oh, where are we here? Sorry. Without it, super thin, almost like it's been like high pass. And then with it, full and awesome and more rounder kind of, yeah, that's kind of a nice little trick there. The next element that I'll usually go about is then listening to the reference track to find out what's like the next kind of key element. I feel like kick is always super important. Getting a solid kick is going to set the foundation for the rest of your loop. And then in this instance, if we listen to the reference, I would say either open hi-hat or kick. In this instance, what I did next was this open hi-hat. So let's take a, let's actually solo it all out. Just like this. Okay, sorry, a little annoying, but let me just turn all this off. So now let's just listen to the kick by itself, actually. Just so you can hear that. Now let's add in the open hi-hat. Okay, so with the open hi-hat, you can see the pattern is just like on the offbeat. Ticka, 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 ticka. Very classic. That's why I usually have one of these already in here. So that way I can just press, I think, Option and then drag it down if I need to layer it out. This way, just a lot quicker of a way to work, I would say. In terms of the sound design, what I did in this instance was, let's see if I actually grabbed the sample. Right here, I snatched something. So let's have a listen to this source. Yep. So in this instance, what I did was I found an area in the reference track where the hi-hat was kind of by itself, isolated again, the show in browser feature, and then did the similar sound function, and then built out a little drum rack with a bunch of additional hi-hat sounds so that I can audition them and try to figure out what sounds the best. And then the main thing here is just listening back. Ours, the reference. Try to really listen to the open hi-hat there, because if you can hear, there is like a ride or some kind of shaker above everything, and that's a little bit of a higher end sound. So you gotta kind of, the more you do this, the more that you'll get better at kind of isolating the sounds with your ear and really focusing on what you need to when building out these elements. In this instance, I ended up layering in a couple different hi-hat sounds, kind of move on quickly, and then the processing, just moving some of the lows. I use this transient shaper, which is the free kilohertz transient shaper, just mapped the knobs to the macros here. Build up the sustain a little bit because I wanted it to decay a little bit longer, have like a more open, loose hi-hat sound. A little bit of saturation to fill up the sound a little bit, add a little bit of grit. And then the main thing is like the volumes once again. So we have a listen. Something like that. Next element that I added is next thing I added was the hi-hats, the closed hi-hats. So let's have a look and listen to that. So the main thing here with closed hi-hats is one of the first things I do is, again, the hi-hat clip that I have is already set up where there's a bunch of hi-hat sounds already in here in this template, and then like the pattern's already playing on the most obvious spot. So what I'll usually do first is kind of find a closed hat to reinforce the open hat. And this way it makes the open hat sound a little bit more like punchier and sicker, but also it gives you the opportunity in the arrangement perspective so that you still have that hi-hat hitting on that offbeat. So you can pull out the open hi-hat during different parts of the song, maybe the intro or maybe build downs and other parts of the arrangement, and still have that driving hi-hat sound. So that's kind of what we have there. And then what I usually do is I'll start figuring out kind of like the skippy, groovy pattern. In this instance, this is kind of what it looks like. I was kind of going for that like little bit of a shuffle. So really pay attention to the close hi-hats. They're mixed quite low in the reference track, so you have to like really like dial it in. But let's kind of listen back and forth between what we have in the reference a few times. This is what we have. And then the reference. Reference. Wait, ours. The reference. Very, very like it's kind of shuffling with almost the snare a bit, so it can be hard to hear. And I kind of just did this by jumping back and forth, doing a little bit of trial and error, figuring out the hits here. A little trick is that you can grab, if you see here, this little bit of down. I think if you do command or command down here, you can adjust the randomization of the velocity. So this is a nice way that you can adjust your hats a little bit so they're kind of constantly hitting different velocities and giving a bit of a groove and sounding more interesting and human throughout the rest of the track. In terms of any processing on this open hi-hat, removing some of the lows, bringing the attack down a bit, so it kind of like, I was trying to get it to not be as abrupt and in the face and kind of like blend in a little bit more, and bringing down the sustain a bit so it tightens up the sound quite a bit. And then a little bit of saturation to bring out, like kind of fill it out and add a little bit of grit to the sound. The next element that I added was the clap, so let's have a look and listen to that. And the reference. So the main thing that you can hear and see is, again, kind of start off with like the standard clap pattern, which is on the 2 and the 4, the 2 and the 4. And so I have my template that'll automatically have something set up there, so I can just move it up and down while auditioning the sounds. But then the next thing is reinforcing it with an additional hi-hat sound here. Something that I like to do is, if you can see here, the first one here is like on the 2 and the 4 and the 2 and the 4, and then this one just on the 2 each time. So it's a way that I try to like to layer sounds so that they're not always hitting at the same time. Kind of add some humanization and a little bit of like movement throughout tracks and house music when things can get loopy and repetitive. Kind of a cool way to nail that. But then other than that, the main thing is getting that like kind of little bit here, and that's what these additional hits right here are for, to make that happen. And then I added one additional clap right at the end to kind of give the end of the phrase a bit of like before it loops back around. Other than that, I was mostly just going through, I have like a bunch of claps here that I use every single time that usually sound pretty good. And then I added an additional extra couple claps, just trying to like listen back and forth to the reference and try to find something that sounds similar to build out a drum rack of sounds. So that way I can kind of audition them, either using the selector or jumping up between the MIDI clips to kind of find the right sounds, and kind of doing the same process where you're playing like this and going back to the reference. Because then after that, the main thing is the volumes. Getting your volumes right is going to be that 80% mark. So here we have the reference, and then ours. Reference. Really trying to listen to the claps, like each element as you're building it in. Because other than that, again, as you might have noticed the pattern here, there's nothing crazy going on with processing. It's all about finding the right patterns, the right samples, and then some light processing, because really then the main mixing that you're going to want to do is setting the right volumes. So we're adding a little bit of a bunch of the lows here. We're tightening up by removing some sustain again, and we're adding in some saturation to kind of fill out the sound, add some grit. And then a new thing that we're adding in here is this this wider plugin. So this is a free one called Polyboost Wider. It's free. I love to do this kind of thing where I map the main knobs to an Ableton rack, and then I have it so this V-strip thing that I've created shows up on each one of my audio and MIDI tracks as I'm building it out. And then this way I can add in some width to the claps. Claps, I always usually kind of hear them. They're like left and right stereo. And then we're going to add like a middle section kind of with the snare, and we'll get to that in a second. But this is a cool plugin that allows like really good stereo sounds, really nice with one knob. Kind of pushes the sounds to the left and right a bit, makes it stereo, makes room in the middle for other elements. It gives you that nice big wide clap sound. Next element that we're gonna add in is that snare. So something that I like to do, and I hear a lot in songs, is claps kind of left and right stereo, and then a snare in the middle, kind of like adding a bit of like fullness to that element. So let's take a listen without it, and then I'll bring it in. This is without it, and then with it. So you can hear it kind of in the middle, adding a bit of like more snappiness and fullness to that element. In terms of the pattern, once again, if you look here, it might look confusing at first, but we'll dial it in. So first thing you can see here, we have the 2 and the 4 and the 2 and the 4. So that again is the template that automatically had that in place. And then after that, I was just adding in additional notes to add that like. So if you kind of look at like the positions of these notes here that I'm kind of moving the mouse over, and then if we jump back to the claps, they're kind of in similar positions. It's just hitting different notes. Another thing that I did is you notice this like small amount of like little notes going here. This is a cool feature in Ableton 12, where if you grab one of these notes and then you go over to here, no, this one, this area here, and you select ornament, you can add flam or grace notes. So if you just click this, it just added 2 additional notes, and it adds this nice little like which is a very cool like human drummer kind of element to add to things. It's very subtle. You can see like the velocity of these additional notes that it adds here and here, quite low, and it kind of adds that little like kind of sound that might happen a lot. And if you listen to the reference track, you can definitely hear that quite a bit. It's that on those like kind of little notes there. So that's a fun little trick. In terms of other than that, with the snare, you might not hear it in the reference as much. You definitely can. But you're also kind of at this point when you're layering, say, the snare with the clap, you also mostly want to listen against the reference track, but also listen against the clap and how you're bringing in the volume into the clap to create one cohesive kind of sound between those two. So like these two together, kind of what you're trying to listen for. Right? And then other than that, any processing will go real quick through because it's not super important. Removing some lows, adding some sustain to try to make like that larger kind of sounding snare, and then a little bit of width again to kind of push it a little bit, but not as much as we were pushing the claps. Then once I kind of have the core sounds, so for me the core sounds would be a kick, open hat, hi-hat, claps, snares, all done with like one shots. So they're high quality one shots. We're in control of them. We're kind of like getting those fundamental core sounds. Then I like to layer in some top loops or drum breaks to kind of add some extra character, some extra polish, some extra like human je ne sais quoi pas kind of thing. Like, so if we listen without it a little bit, and then I'll add in one of the top loops. This is without. And then with. Probably notice like an increase in energy and volume, and almost like it sounds a little bit more pro. So let's have a listen to it by itself. Super cool little loop. I kind of just cut it up a little bit here, as you can see. Did I do anything in terms of, and then one thing I like to do is usually if you go to the warp area here, go to beats, set it to the right facing area, and then dial this back. It tightens up the transits, which makes it a tighter sounding sound. And I'm finding definitely when you're adding in these top loops and drum breaks, when you tighten them up a bit, it helps them glue together and be more cohesive with the rest of your drum tracks, as opposed to some like loose, floppy top loop or something that you're adding on top. It helps it kind of like blend in a lot more. This you're doing to ear and to taste for sure when it comes to the volume. So usually like a good idea would be like have it start at 0 and then dial it back, or bring it down to like infinity, nothing, all the way at the bottom like this, and slowly build it in as you can hear it, and then dial it back a little bit as it's becoming too much. In terms of any processing on this, we're just removing some of the lows. We have some of this one knob sidechain, which I haven't talked about yet, which is an Ableton shaper device, doing kind of like that sidechain shape, going to quarter notes, because kicks are usually just jumping on the quarter notes. And then this shape and this rate is ducking down the volume on like a utility. This is a way that you can get that kind of sidechain pumping sound without having to use a compressor and routing a compressor to the kick each time and dialing in like the compressor settings, which I fucking hate to do. I like just one knob stuff moving quickly. That's how I'm able to finish songs so fast, by developing all these little tricks to make things a lot quicker. Because then with the sidechain, what we're trying to do is trying to have that top loop pump. So it's making room for the kick to come through a lot more, and then also kind of adds like a cool dancey, groovy kind of sound, and then a little bit of saturation to fill out the sound a little bit. And then the last element that we're going to go over here is this additional loop here. So let's have a listen without it, and then we'll add it in. And then with it. And I'm going to solo it now. So there's a cool little like percussive little bit to it. And then this is, if you remember at the beginning when I was going over the open hi-hat, you can kind of hear, I was mentioning I could hear some kind of like ride or something a little bit higher later above. This was my effort to kind of add that in. And so if we take a look at the loop, I'm doing the same kind of thing, pulling back the transient bit to tighten that up so it blends in more with our core hits. We're removing some lows, we're adding some side chains so it's pumping, making room for the kick, and we're also adding some width so that this element's getting pushed a little bit to the left and right. I think that's a pretty good look at the drums for this one. Next, we'll go over like the bass and the synths and the vocals, as well as some of the arrangement. Before we move on, just want to mention that this video is sponsored by good friends over at Rocket Powered Sound. They hooked up the kick that you're hearing in this track, the main kick, and it's part of their Ultimate Sample Pack, which has over 1,000 really iconic and usable sounds. And it really comes into handy when you're doing stuff like this, like similar sound function, having like a solid library of sounds. So if you want to check it out, you can get 30% off by using the link that's on screen now and the code that's on screen now, as well as the code that's in the description. Thanks a lot to Rocket Powered Sound for hooking us up, the community, in this video. And yeah, with that said, let's jump into the 80-20 rule so you can kind of recap everything with the drums here and apply it to your own music.
Hi, my friend, Matt from Best Friends Club here. And if you've been paying attention, then you probably figured out what the 80-20 rule is when it comes to building out your drums. The goal here is to get 80% of the results with only 20% of the time, energy, or effort. And because the first key to the 80-20 rule for drums is to use a reference track, we're making sure that we're effortlessly hitting 80% of a very professional sounding track. In particular, we focus on nailing the pattern, sound selection, and the volume compared to the reference track, so that we keep things fast and focused as we're building out our drums. The second key of the 80-20 rule here is to mix as you go in an extremely streamlined way by only focusing on the volume, as well as a simple repeatable channel strip for each track that we're adding to our drums. The third and final key is to repurpose your old project files and to build up a suite of powerful templates, Ableton racks, and one knob effects that you've personalized and curated over time. If you'd like to get a head start by downloading all the racks, templates, and all the files that you've seen me use in the Ableton project file for this video, or if you'd just like to take a closer look at any of the techniques or tracks you saw me work on in this video at your own pace, you can find a link to this video's project files on screen now and at the second link that's in the YouTube description. I'm recreating a different song from the Beatport top charts every single week and making the project files available to anyone who wants them. You'll also get access to a private Discord where you can ask me and the community questions, as well as share tracks for feedback. If you or your music are not quite ready for a shot in the arm like that, I've also made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that have helped me figure out how to completely finish one new song each and every single week. And you can grab that free Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit by visiting the first link that's in the YouTube description here. However, if you just feel like staying on YouTube for now, that's totally fine. Save that link for later and check out this playlist of videos where I remake drums from other songs from the Beatport top charts. Or if you want to take what you've learned in this video to the next level, definitely check out this video right here.